GI, your government has abandoned you. They have ordered you to die, GI. Do not trust them. Defect, GI. It is a very good idea to leave a sinking ship.
Opponent of the military-industrial complex. He's putting a lot of pressure on Israel and David Ben-Gurion, the first president of Israel, to have nuclear checks because he thought that they had nuclear bombs and they shouldn't have had them. But we know that they got them through stealing uranium from the United States. All fact, by the way, shown in declassified documents. And we know that the mafia wanted him gone because his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, was going super hard. He was subpoenaing them to come in and testify about the whereabouts and the activities of La Cosa Nostra and the criminal activities. And obviously they had the Omerta Code of Silence, so they didn't want to have to be involved in that.
So President Kennedy was going to get to the bottom of this, right? Because he's a very strong-willed guy. He was the president of the United States. And they said, so he said, yes, I am. This cabal of sociopaths said, no, you're not. And he kept pushing and pushing. And they eventually just decided it'd be easier if they assassinated him. Because going through the review process was an executive order to dissolve the CIA. Now, fast forward to someone like Jack Kennedy wanting to disclose this. And they go, no, you're not. This is why the courage needed by our leaders to deal with this is extraordinary, and we just have to hope and pray they find it.
What's your favorite conspiracy theory that turned out to be true?
It's hard to say whether it turned out to be true, but JFK is the biggest one.
And where did you land on that?
I landed on that. It's very possible that Lee Harvey Oswald was involved. It's very possible that other people were involved too. It's very possible that he shot at Kennedy and other people shot at Kennedy at the same time, and that he was a patsy. Yes. And he was put up. Like, he was obviously involved in a lot of intelligence agency shenanigans. He went to Russia, he married a Russian woman, came back to the United States. He had been involved in all sorts of communist propaganda shit. He was definitely not like an above ground guy. He was a shady dude. Yeah. And it's entirely possible that he was one person out of a plot to kill the president, and they put it all on him, and they had Jack Ruby shoot him. But everybody goes black and white on that. You either go Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, or you go he was innocent and the CIA had him assassinated because he was trying to get rid of the CIA, which he was. I mean, Kennedy was trying to pull us out of Vietnam, was trying to get rid of the CIA, he was trying to get rid of the Federal Reserve. There was a lot of like super controversial ideas that Kennedy was trying to push forward, and someone killed him.
His last big speech he gave before he was murdered.
It was a great speech.
What did he say?
It was called the Strategy for Peace speech.
Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living.
And they didn't let the CIA, the State Department, or the Pentagon even see it beforehand.
I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war.
What he says there, among other things, is that the relation between the U.S. and Soviets is tragic. Why should we be enemies? Why should we see them as enemies?
We must conduct our affairs in such a way that it becomes in the communist interest to agree on a genuine peace.
What Kennedy says is so relevant to today. He says to put a nuclear adversary in a position of either suffering a humiliating defeat or using nuclear weapons is either a colossal failure of statesmanship or a collective death wish for humanity.
Nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war.
Which is exactly what Biden is doing.
It's what we face right now.
Yeah.
How was it received in Washington?
They saw him as some kind of idealistic fruitcake.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? The kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living. Peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
The reason that the Christian church became a threat to the Illuminati is that a particular president existed at that time, and that president, through the man that helped set up the Bay of Pigs invasion, became a Christian. It was one for the Lord, and that's John Kennedy. And because of this, They thought they could threaten and force him back in. They tried for 3 months. In fact, 30 days before his death, the Pope ordered him to Rome to appear before him and accept communion at his hand. And Kennedy walked out of the Vatican refusing communion. And that's when they decided that he had to go. So he ordered his death. So if you're wondering they're ever going to solve the Kennedy assassination, don't you believe it?
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day.
Talk about the Kennedy assassination. By David White. You can't talk about the Kennedy
By a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, And frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears. But we have no more urgent task. Let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal. And that is the most important topic on earth, peace. What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, peace in all time.
And what is amazing, absolutely amazing, is that Khrushchev heard it, was carried away, summoned the U.S. envoy, Kennedy's envoy, to Moscow, Averell Harriman, and said, "This is the finest speech by an American president since FDR. I want to make peace with your president."
This may sound crazy, but I'm going to need you to exist with me in the context of everything that came before us for just a moment. The reason we do not have any anti-Zionist presidential candidates is because the last anti-Zionist president we had was unalived by Israel. That's right. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that John F. Kennedy was assassinated in a joint effort between the CIA and the Israeli Mossad. Now, it may be a bit of a misnomer to call JFK an anti-Zionist since he did still consider the U.S. a friend to Israel, but he is still the most oppositional president we've ever had towards the Zionist regime. His policies challenged both the military and political ambitions of Zionist Israel. See, in 1939, Kennedy actually spent some time in Palestine that would make him sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and it would then influence his policies when he later took office. And he was quoted as saying, "The sympathy of the people on the spot seems to be with the Arabs. This is not only because the Jews have had, at least some of their leaders, an unfortunately arrogant, uncompromising attitude, but they feel that after all, the country has been Arabic for the last 100 years. Palestine was hardly Britain's to give away." This belief system made him a neutral and objective party in the Arab-Israeli conflict and inspired his belief in Arab and African nationalism. He actively criticized Western imperialism and affirmed U.S. support for Arab independence, with his affirmation for the support of Algerian independence from France being one of the biggest examples. This all influenced his policy positions when he became president, and there are multiple instances of extreme pushback he had given back against the Israeli government. In 1962, under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, Kennedy instructed the Israeli lobby, the American Zionist Council, which was the precursor to AIPAC, to register as a foreign agent, to enormous dissent. The emergence of Israeli political influence in Congress was also heavily scrutinized at this time. The American Zionist Council pushed back on this, saying that this would destroy the political Zionist movement in the U.S., because at the time, this was not viewed favorably by Jewish groups in the U.S., so their attorneys stalled for time. While all of this is happening, Kennedy was also trying to stop the Israeli nuclear weapons program. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK was a huge proponent for stopping the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So when intelligence revealed that Israel was planning to build nuclear weapons at their Dimona reactor in 1962, this was a huge point of contention. There was a heated confrontation between Kennedy and Ben-Gurion following this, in which Kennedy actually demanded regular U.S. inspections of the reactor to ensure that it wasn't producing nuclear materials. Israel, however, regularly tried to evade inspection, which worsened tensions between the Kennedy administration and Tel Aviv. which in turn caused the Israeli lobby to try to exert pressure on the White House in the wake of the 1964 election. Essentially, they were telling Kennedy to either follow the rules and play along, or they would try to oust him for a friendlier replacement. The final nail in the coffin, so to speak, came in late 1963 with UN Resolution 194. The U.S. supported a resolution calling for continued efforts to resolve the predicament of Palestinian refugees. It was essentially drafted to affirm the right of return for Palestinians displaced by the Nakba. Israel was angry. News of this dropped November 21st, 1963. The very next day, November 22nd, 1963, Kennedy was assassinated. What followed was a starkly different presidency under Lyndon B. Johnson that abandoned any notion of opposition that the U.S. had towards political Zionism. The case against the American Zionist Council was dropped, and they were not required to register as a foreign agent. And within just a few short years, their successor group, AIPAC, would be given tax-exempt status. The Dimona inspections were halted, and Israel began building nuclear weapons as early as 1967. U.S. relations with Arab nations, especially Egypt, deteriorated, and U.S. support for a resolution to the Palestinian refugee crisis completely stopped. And Israel became more aggressive, primarily with its Arab neighbors, which resulted in the Six-Day War in 1967, but also with the U.S., which resulted in the attack on the USS Liberty, which killed 34 Americans and wounded 172 more, a false flag attack that they intended to pin on Egypt. Johnson chose to bury that story in order to not embarrass Israel. It took decades to uncover the truth about that attack. All in all, the assassination of John F. Kennedy erased Israeli opposition and ensured Zionist control of Israel, the suffering of Palestinians, and permanent instability in the Middle East. The motivation is clear. Israel killed John F. Kennedy, and you cannot convince me otherwise.